Welcome to the Intimate Breath podcast. My name is Lore, and here we share personal stories and have open conversations and interviews about lots of things related to intimacy and sexuality. And that is in the very broad sense of the word. So it extends way further than the bedroom and is about really living from a connection to your own aliveness, your own body, your boundaries, and your desires, and creating from that place. So, welcome here. And today I'm talking with Andy Buru. He's from Sweden, and even before I came to live in Sweden, I already heard about him as some kind of rope master or bondage master. And I think that he is, but he's also more than that. It's safe to say that he's a nerd. I think he would use the same word. He's a nerd in anything related to power, surrender, submission, domination, desires, and has a whole lot of knowledge about it. And so I'm really happy that he's here. He's going to introduce himself more in a bit. I hope this talk is valuable as much as it was to me. And we would love to hear how this impacts you. So please write a comment, write us a message. If this was valuable to you, share it with a friend and like us on whatever app you are using to listen to this. Thank you in advance for that. And here we go. I'm really happy you're here. Thank you for making time for this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Do you want to introduce yourself, however it comes this morning?
Sure. So my name is Andy Buru. I work as a workshop leader and a body worker, and maybe also some kind of artist. I'm like an explorer, or like my subject is around sadomasochism and like esoteric eroticism, or BDSM and tantra, if you want to use more kind of mainstream words for it. I'm curious about, like, I work in this like two ways. Like in one way, I'm into the more therapeutic work, um, working with power and surrender and desire and sexuality and like holding space for people in that. But then I also have this more like artistic side to myself that is for me more about like, if healing is about like being safe and taking like as little risk as possible, then doing art is about being brave and taking as much risk as possible. So I'm also curious about creating these more like artistic spaces to kind of discover what sexuality can be about when it do not need to be like healing and caretaking in the most safe way possible.
Mm-hmm.
So then I try to navigate between these two places.
Is there some example that has recently been something valuable for you or like a special experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, now that I've been in Berlin for 10 days and I was here a couple of weeks before, we have been doing this kind of sadomasochistic tea ceremony where we invite people into like a wordless space where they can participate in drinking tea while being dominated and like exploring, I think, suffering or surrender. There is this like thing when you face hardship. I think one way to deal with is with fighting and trying to change things with aggression. I think that is very, to say, prominent in everyday life. To live in this kind of capitalistic hierarchical world, you should fight for your place. But then learning to accept and surrender and kind of just be with what is, I think like the human body or soul or the human being is like equally good at that. So then we created this tea ceremony where we would serve people tea while kind of being in this kind of physical and emotional challenge, because it's slow, it's painful, it goes on for a long time, but someone holds space for you and you do it as a communal experience, because there is maybe 10 people like in the ritual at the same time, and then we have between maybe 20 to 50 people watching, and then it was being witnessed in this experience, like not being alone with it, and seeing how other people deal with their emotion when they face this kind of hardships. So for me, that is very like art focused, and then we did it in like an art gallery or like an art space, and made the invitation to more like an art community. And then people might have like healing or spiritual experiences in this like practice. That's totally fine, but that is never the aim or the goal. It's more like the research about like how do people deal with this, and what do they do in these spaces, and what happens.
I imagine that for a lot of the listeners of this podcast, this is something very new to hear. That these things happen or get created. And I'm curious if you want to say a bit more about, yeah, what you take out of that for yourself. I mean, you've already been saying a bit like what it is about, but in this particular experience, like how is this enriching your life?
For me, it's mainly an invitation to do things differently or try something that is different. I could say an invitation to play, to into a space where the things doesn't have as dire consequences as it has in everyday life. Like say that if people live this kind of very normal life and they are used to like pushing themselves to succeed in this life, changing that strategy just randomly everywhere in life at once, I think is kind of challenging, and it has dire consequences. So coming into a space where you can like relate to the world in another way, I think is super. I don't really want to use the word healing, but I think it has a great potential for like self-discovery or self-growth. And then why I work with the kind of modality of like sadomasochism, I think is because there is so much things going on in the world today that is related to power structures and polarity, and also to sexuality and like desire, and also then to surrender, because I think that's something that people long for. So like these qualities of like power, desire, surrender, I think they are very like at the core of sadomasochism. I think they overlap very much into like the world of tantra or like esoteric practices, because you have like the practices of polarity that really is at like this core of power, or like who has the power and how do you divide power and how do you create this kind of non-equal, where you're not the same, where you decide to consciously be different than the other person. So I think that is like power is like so much part of that, and also then surrender as like a practice, or like accepting the world as it is and being present with it as it is and not trying to change it. And then like this idea of like being allowed to have desires and following your desires. I think they are like, it's just like good, I don't know, like subjects to work on. Then I don't know if I'm just blind because I've been so much into this. So for me, like my whole world is like structured around this trinity of subjects, and maybe other people have other things that they think is much more interesting or like much more important. But for me, they really are at the core of my work.
Yeah, you mentioned that you think we're all longing for surrender, or I don't know how you said it exactly. I was recently listening to a talk about like inner polarity, the masculine, the feminine, and someone said they're like the deepest longing for all of us is to surrender, ultimately. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but it brought me to having worked with horses for a long time, and I learned a lot about leadership there and about like it made me wonder, like, are we a little bit like horses? Because a dog is just gonna follow their owner. Like it doesn't matter how they treat them. There's gonna be some like behavioral issues maybe, if they're treated in a bad way. But ultimately they're just going to follow anyway, most of the time. But horses, they're in herds and they would love to surrender and have a leader that they can trust, but they're all the time going to test if the leader is still capable, if they're a good leader. Some horses are going to test more than others, but they want to be sure all the time that they're in good hands. Otherwise, they're just going to take over and dominate themselves. Make sure that they are looking everywhere if there's actually a tiger coming, or they're going to decide where the grass is going to be eaten, basically. It just made me wonder, are we a little bit like horses in that sense? What is your view on this?
I mean, yeah, at first I think I need to define the difference between surrender and submission, because for me they're very different. Because for me, like, to surrender is kind of to let go and trust that I'm held by life. It's very much like an introverted process. While submitting is kind of to giving myself to someone else and let someone else decide for me, to say that someone else's opinion is better than mine or that their leadership is better than mine. So I that both horses and dogs, they want to submit. They want to have like a clear leader. Then I don't know if they surrender to things or not.
Yeah, I've been using the words differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that everyone longs to surrender, definitely, to be held. I think it's very much like to not be the one having to perform, to do things, to be the receiver instead, to like stop the doing and being in more like a receiver or like in a being state. And I think that is a reflection upon how life is like, or how modern life is, where you there's a lot of doing going on, a lot of controlling, a lot of having your purpose and going somewhere. So then surrendering and just being and like seeing that life holds you in a way, I think that is a deep longing for everyone. And I think like that's ultimately like how you meet God, or if you want to have an orgasm, you need to surrender. Like you can't be in control. Or if you want to feel that, I don't know, enlightenment or like Satori or these kind of feelings of being like completely in bliss and oneness with the universe. Like, I mean, you can't be in controlling mode if you want to do that. So I think this search is like clearly like part of something that I think almost everyone will benefit from or want, or once you have like tasted it, I think it's very common. I think that's also why people like get into like this kind of breath works and what do you say, psychedelic substances and like this kind of, or into sadomasochism or tantra or polarity. I think this is like a common search. I should maybe also say like, also, I mean, I think it's like a big thing like for men nowadays, being used to be in this like controlling in kind of this heteronormative society, and then being allowed to go into like surrender and just be instead, I think is like a great like calling or gift that is coming. But then this longing for submission, kind of like putting someone else's judgments ahead of oneself, being led and kind of being good for someone else. I think like if I go into submission, then I don't care about myself so much. I kind of care about something greater, and I take pleasure in being out of service, doing well for someone else. Yeah, I think everyone has to. I mean, I think it's funny when you talk about the difference between dogs and horses, because it sounds to me like horses kind of have a higher requirement on their leader. They won't like submit blindly. They kind of make sure that the person deserves their submission or
That's
like
my
their following.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that some people, they have a higher requirement to submit to someone or like follow someone. Like, I mean, for me, that is usually quite a controlling person. I love to submit if I know that the other one knows better than me. So like if I study quite a lot of Ikebana flower arrangements and tea ceremonies, and I love to find a teacher that is way more competent than I am, and totally like submit myself to do whatever they told me to, and like trust that they will make it better, or will make me better by following them. So yeah, I think this longing to submit is also like part of a longing. But I think it's not, I don't think it's as common as I think surrender, I would say, is universal, but I think submission, I think people have different tendencies to it, because some people maybe just want to be more dominant in their life and control more things, want to be riders instead of horses. I think that is totally valid also.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I just want a nice balance in where in my life am I the rider, where am I the following horse, and to know where, where is my leadership in good use and where not necessarily. But I'm curious, maybe it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but I get curious how you would draw the parallel to the bigger politics and leadership of countries and nations.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of simple. I mean, I think like we live in this kind of patriarchal capitalistic world that is kind of built upon people trying to dominate each other for resources and trying to like accumulate as much as possible, where you are taught that you need to be dominant to be successful in a way. And the people that are not successful in this, they are forced to be in the submissive role. And I think it's like it comes, I don't know what you call it, this non-circular way of living, like this, we're just consuming things around us. Everyone wants more all the time. And I mean, that's why we see that the earth is literally running out of resources, and we have global warming and like the end of fossil fuels and all of this. And I think that is because people have this like dominating approach to life, trying to like accumulate and get more and get ahead, compete, and like of course I think it has led us, like humanity has had this crazy evolution of technological development, which I think like is amazing. That's why people live longer nowadays. That's why like not as many people die in childbirth. Yeah, why we can cure many forms of cancer and blah blah blah. I mean, we have the internet and all of these good things, but I mean it has come of the cost that we're like kind of running out of resources, both on the planet level, but I think also like on a like emotional, like maybe spiritual level. I think that's why people are burning out and getting more confused about what they want. Like life is more complicated, I think, nowadays. So I think that is where like this drive for domination, and in the system there is not much reward for surrender and submission. And then you can also take the spin of it out of like with feminism and like gender equality, like all of that. Women are kind of, what you say, like encouraged to take the same space as men, and then it's like quite unfair, I think, because I think women has to try much harder than men to succeed in society. So, and then there is no one left doing the more like traditional feminine kind of aspect of life.
Yeah.
And of course, it's that everyone can choose whatever they want to. I mean, I think that's why I'm kind of, in a way, I like to say the sadomasochistic kind of subculture better than the tantric subculture, because then it's so clear that it's not connected to gender when you talk about dominant and submissive. It's very gender neutral. But while in the more like esoteric tantric scene, you always talk about the masculine and the feminine. And sometimes it's linked to the genders and sometimes it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I just want to, it brings me to power dynamics in more like one-on-one relationships, personal relationships. In a romantic relationship or sexual or just a friendship, there will always be elements that are adding to some kind of power dynamic. I'm not sure if you would use different words actually. But gender, as you were naming now, age, financial resources, background, lots of things. I guess I'm just curious um, how you talk about that being healthy and when it becomes a little bit unhealthy or maybe in the way of truly connecting. If it's and the difference between like how can we be intentional about it and explicitly acknowledging it, or um, if it's unspoken or unacknowledged, like how can we become more aware of it? That's a lot of question at once. But yeah,
Mm.
wondering if there's some things
Yeah, I
coming
mean,
up for you.
yeah, I mean, I can start to dig into it, and maybe you can direct me in a different direction, or like steer me in some more into more details. But I mean, I think the about like power and power dynamics in intimate relating, whether it is friendships or kind of love relationships or like creative endeavors or whatever it is. I think that being conscious about it and also consensual about it, knowing like what different roles we play. I think that it's important. Maybe first, like trying, I could define how I think about polarity or like what it is. Because for me, a power dynamic is a polarity. Because for me, like I think the idea is to have two roles that are kind of mutually dependent on each other.
Mm-hmm.
So and that are reinforcing each other or helping the other to like express themselves more fully, the more you kind of differentiate or like the further you pull them apart.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most obvious example is like the leader and the follower in dance.
Mm-hmm.
So like the more the leader can go into leading, the more the follower can go into following and vice versa. And the
Mm-hmm.
better the follower is at following, the better the leader will be at leading. So being able to have this polarity, but they still need to stay in contact. Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they disconnect from each other, then it's just one person being unbalanced in just one position. So it's kind of that you use your connection or relationship to another being um, to create this mutual dependence, um, doing something for the others that they can't do for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think it needs to be balanced. So I think that you can't pull more in your direction than the other person can pull in their direction, because then the power balance, it kind of tips and it becomes unbalanced, and I think that's unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if like in like a love relationship, if someone is very, very dominant and pulls super hard into the dominant polarity, and their partner are not able to or want to or have an experience of being equally submissive, then the relationship will tip out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And it can work some different ways in my experience. Either it kind of breaks the relationship, or it forces the person to go further into a polarity than they want to. So for example, if you are with a very submissive partner who wants to be very deep into their submissive mindset or being, it kind of may force another person to be more and more dominant to be able to balance that submission.
Mm-hmm.
And that is maybe not always wanted in my experience, or like people are not like up for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's expressed itself like clearly when I know people like online dating, and then you say that, oh, I would like to play with like power dynamics, or want to play with like sadomasochism or dominance and submission, and then someone like says, yeah, for me that means, I don't know, beating you red and blue and tying you up in a cellar somewhere, and then you can say that's a quite extreme dominant polarity. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other person, oh, I don't know if I can go there because like it's way too much. I was more thinking about like maybe you being more like animalistic or aggressive in bed, and I'm being more like following or submissive to this.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think like finding out like how much of polarity that you're able or willing or want to create
Mm-hmm.
in an intimate relating. Like similarly, I mean, you just took the example of age. Like if you are if you are like in a, I would say mainly, I think friendship or like some kind of, I don't know, master apprentice or like learning from someone older than you or like dedicating yourself to. I think a lot about this from me studying tea in Ikebana, because like all my teachers are like Japanese grandmothers. And then of course there's like an age polarity in that, and where I kind of need to submit to their ways because it's the only way to learn it. And then like the more I'm willing to submit to their ways, which is might be more, I don't know, like old school heteronormative, there's like very clear ideas how things should be, but the more I can go into the student mindset in that, or the younger being taught by the older, I think it's a beautiful polarity, but it's something that we must both be like willing to play out in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, studying this in Japan is very easy because I think in Europe we have this kind of, what you say, like ageism, that we kind of look down upon old people and everyone should be young and beautiful and successful, and old people, they are like the old boring that no one is interested in anymore. But I think in Japan there is much more like of an honoring of age and knowledge, experience. So then I think this polarity between the old and the young, it is very clear and very easy, at least for me, to step into when I'm there.
When I'm listening to you and we're talking about this, I get this image of attraction also being very linked to kind of like the edge of polarity that is like asking me to grow or express myself more in a certain role, but to the degree that I, like in a way that I want to, like there's a longing to live that part out more with the help of that other person, basically. I don't know if you're following me, and if you have thoughts on that too.
I mean, I completely agree with you. That I think that attraction happens when you are like offered to step further into a polarity and you need someone to balance you in that. And so then being attracted to someone that where you could create this deeper polarity with, I think that is like super common. Then I wonder sometimes if we can be attracted to safety instead, like not like exploring the edge of polarity, or actually someone that you know that there will be no polarity with this person, that we are exactly the same and we want exactly the same thing and we think exactly the same way. I think it's possible to be attracted to that also, but then I don't know if that's the word attraction is the right word. Because I don't think that's what people, I don't think that is what makes people have good sex, for example. Then I think it's more the attraction to the polarity instead of the sameness. So yeah, I definitely think it's this, like that from polarity, and that someone offers you to step in more into a polarity that you want to be in. But I think that's why it's that's why I think it's so important to be conscious and consensual about it. Because if you look back at, we were talking a little bit about gender before, like if it comes with like an assumed polarity that is based on your gender on like a societal level, then it's not consensual, and it's maybe you're conscious about it, or maybe it's this is just how it is. So I haven't never thought about this, or why I behave the way I do, or why I end up in these positions that I that I do. So I think that being allowed to choose yourself is like the key to it, or being aware of what choices that you make.
So if people are listening and they're like wondering, how much is this playing out in my relationships? Like how would you start that conversation or that inquiry for yourself?
That's a good question. I don't think I have thought about it before. I mean, I think it comes down to desire for me,
Mm.
like figuring out what I am desiring with another person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I am with a partner, like why am I attracted
Mm-hmm.
to them? Like who do I see myself to be with them? Or like who could they enable me to be, or what could we become together? Um, and if that kind of has some kind of polarity into it, or contains these ideas so that we should not be equal, we should do other things than just
Mm.
provide safety or like equality and to each other, then I think there is like a longing for a polarity
Mm-hmm.
there that I think it's good to like be conscious and consensual
Yeah.
about.
And mm?
But then I think like also just take one like add on to this, because like the polarity that I'm like kind of put into when I'm in Japan studying tea and ikebana, I mean, it's not, of course, it's consensual because I decide to go there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like I have this negotiation with my tea teacher,
Yeah.
hey, can we relate to each other like this? So it is also like a cultural like way of like a legacy or a knowledge, or it's being like how it's being given over from generation to
Mm-hmm.
generation, and at least having some pre-knowledge about this, that it might be like this before I went to Japan. I think that is
Yeah.
helpful because then I don't get so shocked when I end up in it. So I think that there kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, there I think there is consciousness and consensuality into it, but it's also like sometimes it comes with how the practice looks like, or like how it is being done. So I think it's also like there's also like how much freedom do you really have um, to approach this in whatever way
Mm-hmm.
you want to.
Yeah, it sounds like there are different levels of consent possible. A little bit like stepping into a BDSM scene and not really knowing exactly what tools are going to be used, but kind of saying like, okay, I'm going to step into the dungeon and trust this person. But then with tea ceremonies.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting because when I came into the BDSM or the sadomasochistic scene like 20 years ago, um, then I remember like there was, as I like experienced it, that there was so much more. You really entered from the
Mm-hmm.
bottom. In saying that like anyone who came into the scene, that you are submissive from the start because you can't be a dominant before you have been
Yeah.
submissive. And it was much more like a way of it was being. There was a very kind of, not strictly, but it was like a defined way how to enter into this kind of culture. But I think today this is kind of being much more loosened up.
Mm-hmm.
So people like, so what do you want? Like, do you want to be the dominant? Do you want to be the submissive? What do you like? And there's kind of less guidance coming from the like culture or the history of the practice.
Is
Um,
it
so
is it true that I'm hearing a personal preference to the earlier version, the more
mm,
traditional?
yeah, I mean, I think both are. It's hard to know. It's always, like when you think back about something, always like the grass is greener on
Yeah.
the other side. But yeah, I think I would prefer to have it. For me, it's like a pendulum moving between different places. I think it has swung very far to this freedom of self-expression. You can be whatever you want to, and like, what do you
Mm-hmm.
want? Um, and I think I have a longing for like more like for this pendulum to swing back a
Mm-hmm.
bit, at least in the area of like BDSM and sadomasochism, and like how to approach it. Because I think there is much to learn from like the traditional ways it was being done in a way. Um, So I think it's also interesting to this, like how much we expect to be able to decide our place in like a hierarchy or in a polarity. But maybe I'm also just very influenced from how much I appreciate the way of like learning Ikebana and tea ceremonies in Japan. Because there is such a care from the elderly generation to the younger generation of like them wanting me to learn this, kind of carry this knowledge onwards because they are dying. And without someone taking over this knowledge, it's going to die in a way. So it's much more about preserving a culture and less about what do I want as an individual.
So there's some surrender there and some submission there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I got curious about the more like non-consensual power dynamics, and I'm thinking about those situations where I feel like someone else is putting me on a pedestal, and it's in the way of, like, makes it really hard to truly feel connected. Or the other way around, sometimes I'm just like, I feel so much more smaller than someone else, and I just don't know how to, as fast as I want to, kind of like feel more equal with that person, and feel my confidence and my self-worth there again. I'm curious, like, how are you navigating those situations, if you ever have them, or like what would be a suggestion of you to play with this and grow in those dynamics?
Like for me personally, I think I am in a bit of a weird position because I spend so much of my time being in like festival and the workshop leader role, where I kind of per se have much more experience and power. And I think it's my responsibility to kind of deal with that. Like I'm going to be on a pedestal a lot in my life, or as the way I live my life right now in my professional life.
So what does that mean for you, dealing with it?
It means that I do not interact privately with people that have attended like sessions or retreats and maybe also festivals with me, which kind of makes it into a quite lonely position, because like most people that I bump into has been to my workshops or been in retreats and so on. So I think yeah, I mean, it is a place where, like, for me, have that I have taken a quite conscious decision of being like a teacher of this subject in a way, and I think it limits how I can interact with people because of the power dynamic it creates, and because it's such a vulnerable subject of sexuality and power.
Do you want to dive a bit deeper into, like, what are the dangers of that?
I mean, I think the dangers is that people wanting to be dominated by me, wanting to me, thinking that, oh, but he's the one who knows how to make everyone surrender, so I want to give myself to him. But maybe they don't see me as a person, but rather the person in power. And I think it's like I think there's like it's being this kind of positions of powers are often being abused. I think you see it all over and over again in like different spiritual teachers being, what do you say, in the spotlight for being abusive or using their positions of power. So I think deciding to be like a teacher of sexuality, I think I think it comes with giving up art of your own personal pleasure. Sometimes I think it's very different because when I, for example, here in Berlin, I'm much more in the art scene where everything is kind of an artistic exploration rather than, and there is not the same kind of money involved as in the maybe tantra scene where it's about like personal development and people are paying to like grow as an individual or have like a healing experience. It also comes back to this division between, for me, between art and healing in a way, or art and therapy. So I think if you are more in the kind of some kind of spiritual self-development, helping people to grow or to heal or to deal with therapeutic shit, then I think it puts me in a place of power with kind of that does limit how, like that does put me on a pedestal that kind of, and I don't think there's any way around that in a way.
Yeah, I've seen you be very consequent or like strict in that. I have a lot of respect for that way of looking at it. I've been personally part of a community where the leaders were kind of mixing in the more artistic view of it and trying out this thing of like, okay, there are power dynamics anyway in any relationship. So this whole thing of like having rules on teachers not interacting sexually with assistants or participants, we're going to question that and explore if it's possible to go around it. You're saying there's no way around it, and they were questioning that. And in my view, it went really, really wrong. And I had a very bad experience with that too. But I think it also taught me a lot about the risks and yeah, I was curious if.
But maybe I think it, like my view on this, I think is also a reflection upon how society works today. Like I think it's almost like a joke because I think of course I don't know how tantra was practiced in India. Is it 3,000 years ago? Like I have no idea. But I would guess that it was not so consensual or conscious. I would guess that you would like following a guru and it was like a sect or a cult where you kind of gave yourself
probably
to complete. I would guess that it's like this, and I think this is like what. Yes, I think like in society today we're kind of saying that we need to be conscious about this power dynamics and how it affects relationships, and we are against the. It comes naturally for me to use the word abuse of power, but maybe against the use of power in many situations, or we need to be very conscious about it and. I'm completely along. I think it's like it's what the world needs right now because we live in this giant hierarchy where power is being abused all the time. So I think of course it's totally possible to just say no. It's fine to use your power or I know the narratives that's being told in like no, but you're initiating people with your much more experience into something that they could never learn themselves by just listening to you or by having their experience with someone that are and also beginner would never be the same by having the experience with someone that is so much more kind of experienced. Like you have the same dynamic in like in the sadomasochistic subculture with like pro dominatrixes and pro doms who get money for initiating people into things. I think like that whole dynamic like exists and but right now what I feel it on some kind of social level we are trying to step away from that, or whoever this we is, but at least I am trying to step away from that, kind of decide, okay, no, if I want to have this role of the teacher or of the more knowledgeable person in this area, then I will kind of limit myself in my own kind of pleasures.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about the word initiation, so I I feel a lot for that dynamic too. And I guess when I'm listening to you, I'm wondering if the gurus in India from I also don't know how many years ago, if there's a difference in like fully acknowledging like, yeah, I am the guru, like and like owning that role, and then also not kind of dismissing that there is a power in that somehow, rather than saying, okay, well, let me see, what am I saying? uh, in a way, I'm kind of implying that guru from so many years ago is more owning their role, but you're doing exactly the same. You're fully saying like, I'm a teacher and this is what that means for my personal pleasure and life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I have learned from like sadomasochism and like playing with power and power dynamics, like because it's so interesting because now in my professional role, I try to step away from it or like kind of isolate this power dynamics or being very aware of them. But when I play with it personally, like I play with them, it's more as art. So I try to play with them wild or as crazy as I dare to. And my experience is that like when you own that you are like that you want to be like a dominant princess asshole that is selfish and sadistic and deviant and perverted, like when you own that, then it pops up less in everyday life and other places. Like people that suppress their desires or their potential, I think it's going to have it expressed in non-consensual and non-consensual and non-conscious ways in life. I mean, you see this all the time. We have this like the best example ever. There was this very famous police. I don't know if you say officer, but he was very high up in the Swedish police kind of what you say organization. And he was always fighting for women's rights, equality. He was really hated inside the police force because they are not so much for women equality always. So they fought that. So they would have a nickname for him, calling him Captain Girly Dress, because he cared so much for women and for women's rights. And he was very much like fighting against trafficking and prostitution. And he put this as like number one on the agenda. And then it turns out after a couple of years, people discovering that he is the one who is getting young girls that are placed in protective care because they are victims for addiction and abuse, and taking them and selling them in private brothels and abusing them. So like I think you always see this, like people who are on the surface like appear in one way to like really be like, I'm the number one champion for this thing. I think it's very common like that there is something repressed been underneath in a way, like, so whenever I always get worried when people kind of don't dare to talk about their darkness or admit it or
Yeah, I feel quite impacted hearing that story actually.
yeah, I mean it's completely crazy. And I think it's the same story is being told over and over again, not about this particular, but about like other people that like abuses their power. And then I'm like, yeah, maybe you should, if you're like so attracted to power or like if power and control and vulnerability is such a big thing in your life, maybe you should just do sadomasochism instead and like explore this consciously with someone who likes it and wants it.
Definitely. I mean, for me, that's a big part of how I look at kink and BDSM is like, if it feels so healthy for me to explore those parts that aren't necessarily lived out or healthy to express on the streets, but that are all inside of us. to some degree at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would agree with me there, actually.
Yeah, I totally. I'm always thinking about how much this is a reflection of the society that we live in today. And maybe if the world looks completely different in 100 years, maybe then people will not have this attraction to power and surrender and submission. Or maybe it will be always the same. I don't know, like, are human beings hierarchical beings at some kind of core, or is it possible to live in another way? Because I see it also like when I end up in some of these very hippie communities that say that we have no hierarchy here. I see there is so much of like an token kind of battle for power going on.
Yeah. I mean, what do I know? But it definitely feels to me like we're herd animals that have naturally a hierarchy. And it's fun to play with that intentionally for me.
Yeah, the same way. So it's the way I also view it.
I get curious if for people that feel very new in this whole topic of power dynamics and sadomasochism. Oh God, I can't pronounce that word. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say
Sadomasochism.
BDSM. I'm gonna do the broad term. What would be like a fun first step to explore this with a playmate of whatever kind?
Yeah, I mean, I often get these questions, so I wrote down like 4 games for beginners that kind of touches upon different parts of BDSM or sadomasochism.
Woohoo! You have a resource for this.
Yeah, so I wrote down this kind of 4 basic games that are like based on exercises I often do in retreats that I think is totally easy and not dangerous and that you can do at home. And I can just talk about them quickly so people get like a broad view for it.
Yeah, I would love to.
So one of the exercises is like a bondage exercise where you either like wrap the person in plastic wrap or you tie them up with some bathrobe, belt or some rope, whatever you have, so the person can't kind of interact back in some way. And then you give them sensations in this from this perspective where they can only be the receiver. And for me, it's like a very typical like bondage scenario. So like when you do it to serve the person who is without control. So you could say that you force someone to let go control or you offer them to let go physical control to be only the receiver of sensations in their body. So I think that is one game. The other game is this kind of play fight. And you kind of decide that the winner is going to get to take pleasure out of the loser. So you kind of fight for power, and then whoever wins gets to do things with the loser. And of course, you like negotiate beforehand what these things may be, and you can like decide beforehand if you want to decide beforehand who's going to win or who's going to lose, or if you actually want to fight for power for real in a way. I mean, another game is this kind of more like traditional kind of spanking, to kind of play with pain and like receiving pain in a way that the body can handle it and feel safe and process it. So you get like high on endorphins and get to like experience what happens when you surrender to pain instead of trying to fight it. And how you can, and then how you mixes that with sexuality and like pain and pleasure together. And the last game is that one person is like the slave or like the servant, and the other person simply tells them what to do. How can you serve me now in the best way possible for me to get pleasure out of you? And then it can be anything from like receiving touch or telling the other person to dress in a certain way or to cook your dinner in a certain way. And like how selfish or how precise can you be in expressing what your desires.
Oh,
And then that touches more about this kind of, because like this in this kind of fighting for power game, it has a lot to do with this kind of animalistic part of sadomasochism, like when you kind of are going more into your animalistic raw and kind of this fight for power and then getting taken by something that is stronger than you. And this with the spanking or like pain and pleasure, of course, it's the pain and pleasure whole thing with the sadism, masochism as part. And then with this kind of servant game is this domination, submission game. So there is this description of these 4 games that you play, and they're like 1 to 2 hours each that you can do with a partner. And I think they're like safe enough and easy enough to understand so that you can have this little negotiation with someone and try it out.
It sounds awesome for sweet dates. Date nights. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly how it's like intended, or in a way.
Yeah, I can add the link of that resource in the description. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one way to kind of actually, because I'm also a big fan of doing and trying and playing rather than kind of discussing and trying to intellectualize what you want, because I think it's so complicated to know what you want. And by doing, I think it's a much easier way to get a feeling for what there is.
Yeah, I think I went the longer way of really diving deep into my desires, coming from a place of like, I need 5 minutes to know what kind of touch I want to ask now for the coming 3 minutes. But then when you dive deeper into that, those dynamics come up naturally, or came up naturally for me, at least after a while. But that took a while, yeah. Yeah, you also give workshops around the art of rejection. The last festival where I was at, I was scheduled in at the same time as you, so I couldn't join. But I'm wondering if you want to say a little more about that part of power dynamics and play.
Yeah, sure. I think that like the biggest fear, I almost dare to say that it's the biggest human fear or the biggest fear for everyone, but is that to like not be allowed to belong, or to be like what you say, exiled and rejected and be left alone. I think that is the biggest fear, of a pack herd animal. So that's why people are shit scared of rejecting other people, because they think maybe they will not come back to me. Maybe this was my only chance for love. Maybe this was my only chance for companionship, and now I reject that. So am I doomed to be alone now forever? People are shit scared about being rejected, because it might mean, okay, am I not allowed to come back now? Did I do something wrong? Am I not wanted? Am I not good enough? So I think kind of playing with this topic and making it what fears are actually true. When it comes to fear, I think there is like how dangerous something is, what the risk of that fear coming true actually is. I think that is like one factor. But then I think it's also what we perceive it to be, or what we are taught it to be. And I think that most people are overestimating the risk of being completely rejected or being completely exiled by daring to be a bit selfish or daring to express reaction. So I think there is a bit of a loss in synchronicity between these two things, like how the risk of being exiled, how big it actually is, and how big we perceive it to be. So I think people in general are unnecessarily scared of being rejected, maybe because it is such a primal fear. So then I created this kind of workshop or this theme to kind of become friends with reaction, because I also think there is many kinks or many like fetishes that kind of touches upon the theme of reaction.
I love it. I love getting no's when I choose for it, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, someone that is really kind of picky with what they want, or someone that is like really like a queen or a princess, or like really are clear in their kind of their desires and dare to express that in like unapologetic way. or also kind of playing, I think I like playing with this kind of with pleasure, with tease and denial, about be given pleasure and then have it taken away, or someone else controlling one's pleasure. I think it's also like on the theme of rejection. So I think this kind of comes up in many ways. You have like all these desires around like seeing your partner having sex with another person, kind of touching upon all these kind of jealousy things, or being like, so I think there's like a lot of sexual fantasies that kind of circles around the idea of rejection. So then I decided to make this kind of workshop or this kind of structure to play with the theme. So I think what it kind of offers is that for the people that are learning to reject, because in a way I don't think you can dominate anyone if you can't reject them, because I think you must be able to tell them that they are doing something wrong and that you don't want them close to you, that they're, so you must be able to kind of, it's kind of in the responsibility of the dominant to reject or punish or correct behaviors that they don't find nice in a way. Because if a dominant can't kind of own their own desire and their own, making sure that they are satisfied, then the submissive person will always be in the mind fuck, like, am I doing a good job now? Is this what they want? Like, why are we doing this? And it makes it very hard to surrender and let go if you're always trying to like mind read what the dominant want. But if you can trust that the dominant will kind of super clearly express their desires and reject anything that they don't want, it's much easier to let go and trust that kind of that you're doing a good job. So then in this structure, the person who is in the dominant role gets to learn how to, gets to practice to be super selfish in their desires, then reject anything that they don't like. And then it also touches upon this theme, because many people, when they end up in the dominant role, and if they don't get what they want, they kind of go into this mode that there's their job to teach the submissive person how to do it. So like, for example, if I order a slave to give me a massage and then they're doing a shitty job, then I turn into the massage teacher instead. But when I do that, then I'm no longer in the then I'm no longer receiving in a dominant role. Then I'm kind of giving a gift of teaching someone else how to do a proper massage. So I see that like learning to receive and like expect the other person to do well. And if they don't, like, for example, I have a person that I played with lately who I asked them to massage me and they were really bad at it. So I actually sent them home with a video instruction on how to give good massages. And they're like, yeah, you can come back when you have studied this properly and you will give you a second chance. But like, I don't want to teach you how to give me a massage. Like, find someone else to practice on. So in this after rejection, like learning to actually be really picky and expecting the other people to do well for you or to be good at what they are doing. I think you need, that's something that is good to practice, to learn to be in the dominant space. But then for the person who then is in the submissive role, then learning to actually be rejected and actually craving to be close to the dominant person and actually really feeling desperate for being allowed to be with them. I think that creates a huge power dynamic, a big polarity that is interesting to play with. Like, as long as you feel safe in this kind of game, and like trying to figure out how to please the dominant person without needing to receive the massage instructions exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
So this is like the theme of this, the art of rejection, but there's also like then one more like element to it that I think is super important, and it's kind of learning to do all of this, being super selfish and super like just reacting people, expecting them to be good, but still making them feel good about it, or kind of creating a situation that is meaningful for everyone involved. And that's, I think, is the challenge, because like if you're just going to be like dogmatically selfish, I think that's very easy. But being very selfish, but at the same time creating a meaningful experience for your partner, and yourself. I think that is like the goal or
Ideal.
the higher form of being dominant. So like serving you becomes a pleasure or a privilege that people want to do. So that is also practice within this art of
Yeah.
rejection.
It sounds like the element of care just brought in.
Yeah, definitely that's part of it. Or also care, but also showing your when you're happy with someone and showing that. Because I think a lot of people, especially men, when they are in their dominant role, they are very much in a doing place, so they don't like express a lot of desire or like appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
So also as the dominant one, like if you receive the massage and it's really good, then show that by moaning or moving,
Mm-hmm.
like give that feedback, so the person feel that they are, so the submissive one feel that they're doing a good job or that they feel valued in their
Yeah.
actions.
I feel a lot of aliveness just listening to you. I feel a turn on just talking about the subject. But yeah, and I also really appreciate your workshops or the ones I've experienced, and it's such a beautiful invitation to step into new things in a slow and embodied way. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just to become some kind of trademark of how I work, because it's just what I enjoy myself so much.
Mm.
Like I don't think I learn so much from this kind of lectures or things that are very detailed in how something should be done. It's more like this invitation to explore
Mm.
in a way, and then trying to figure out what are the parameters or the like conditions for this kind of learning experience to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is the things that must be dictated in the workshop that is non-negotiable, or like this needs to be in place for people to be guided, or like to like end up in the place where I kind of promise in the description of a retreat or a
Yeah.
workshop, and trying to be as minimal with that as possible. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just something I enjoy immensely doing. It's maybe like a trademark of me on how I work.
And you're immensely good in it. uh, yeah, how can people find you?
So if you want to have an overview of what I'm doing, then my webpage is a very good place to go, because it has a link to all the different events that are happening. So that's andyburu.se. Like one thing that I believe a lot in is to teach in existing communities. So it's like my different organizers, they have their own community. So it's more like I'm invited into a community and kind of teach there, and I try to do it repetitively to kind of build like some kind of group of people, or like some around that are interested in these subjects. And then there is also, I'm writing a book the book is written, but I'm recording it right now and I'm publishing it for free as I go on the webpage. So the webpage is a good way to get the summary or get kind of in contact with the local organizer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there is a newsletter.
And that's going to be in the description as well. So you can find it there. Sweet. Is there anything else you want the world to know through this podcast? Or does it feel complete for you?
I think it feels complete.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Andy.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.